What's up? It's Max. You're listening to Streaming Cassettes on Wingman of the Year. Another great guest, another great time. I'm in the studio, the Red Room, whatever you want to call it. To my left, we have the lead vocalist for the band Western Terrestrials. This is Nick Charyk. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm very happy to be here with you. This is exciting.
Yes. I was telling you before we started recording, this is our first act full-blown into the country sphere, so I'm very excited about that.
Well, we're happy to bring the country to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, like nowadays, like I have a full like eclectic mix. I'm probably more in like the hip hop, like EDM realm, but growing up, my mom and stepdad were really in the country, especially 90s, like kind of that classic 90s country sound. And like, so you'd be surprised, but there'll be some songs I could just whip out singing and people probably look at me with like three heads, like, what? How do you know that song?
It's funny. Yeah. So I grew up in Thetford, Vermont, and, you know, in country circles or hip country circles, there's been this sort of resurgence of appreciation for 90s, you know, that 90s country.
Mm-hmm.
And I just know it. It was on the school bus. It was like at, you know, playing at the fair, like all those songs are deeply ingrained in there. And like, I felt conflicted at best about that kind of music when I was growing up. I got into punk rock and stuff and had almost a disdain for 90s country, but mainstream country has gotten a whole lot worse since then. And so I think there's almost a nostalgia for that era of country. And, you know, when I listen to Alan Jackson or something now, I was like, it's kind of good.
You have a different like preference from back then.
But what I got, you know, got me into this strain of country music that I've been playing for some time is really like going much further back. I came from, my dad was an amateur musician and he'd play me Bob Wills and Merle Haggard and Hank Williams when I was like a kid, you know, lullabies. And at some point, getting into music in my teens and playing in punk bands, I got really into The Clash. Was the first band that really did it for me. And they're a band that sort of dabbled in, you know, everything from like hip hop to reggae to old rockabilly and even some country stuff. And that sort of opened doors for me. You know, always loved Elvis, and I started sort of putting the pieces together, this sort of strain of American music that goes back, you know, before rock and roll, but follows through. And so for me, and I get asked, you know, are you guys a country band? What are you? Oh, sort of, but for me, it's like this strain of American sort of folk tradition music that goes through rock and roll, through sort of all kinds of music. And we do a bunch of other weird stuff too, but it's like, if it feels good and it's got like a little twang, a little country feel on it, that works for me. And then I think about it, and it's like, that is what I grew up around, and it kind of makes sense in that sense as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely gonna dive into more of that, but there was like this like line, right? There was this sort of theme I noticed where, like you said, you try different concepts, but it is kind of like that. I don't want to label it, not in such in a bad way, but like you said, it's very more Americana than maybe traditional country in a sense. Like there's obviously those elements, but I felt like you could definitely tell the rock lead. Like that's definitely in the mix of the sound. I mean, I guess some people call it Southern rock in different realms, but I definitely noticed that pattern in the different tracks you have. It's really cool. I really like that vibe.
I appreciate it. And it has, you know, objectively very little to do with sort of modern mainstream radio country. It's not, I listen to it sometimes out of like horror, you know, it's like watching a car crash. You can't help it. And I spend a fair amount of time driving around, and like every other radio station in Vermont is going to be a mainstream pop country station. But that, you know, I get when people say, I don't like country, if that's what country is to you. But if someone says that, you like country, everybody does. There's something in there in that tradition going back generations, that there's something that'd do it for you, and you just haven't heard it yet if you don't like it.
Right. I think that's a good assessment. The way to put it, you know, like I think when you really break it down, it's more of, there could be, like you said, almost like over pop, or like it has like such a deep connection with like rhythm and blues and like that whole era. And I think you could really pull out something that you're a fan of one way or another.
I think so. And I mean, whether it's rock and roll, whether it's the blues or soul or any of these sort of, you know, forms of music that have come together relatively recently in history, it's all sort of pulling from the same sort of stew of American music, and it goes back further than that, and the whole world and all over the place. But for me, that's just sort of made sense. It's like, this is I grew up in Vermont. I've listened to all these different kinds of music, and I'm going to find other people who get excited about the same things, but we'll play whatever we feel like playing. And if we want to play a song by the band, we can do that. Or if we want to play an Alan Jackson song, that's fair game too. But like, can you call it just country? I guess not, but it's definitely country,
Right. Exactly. So let's dive into the group you're in, currently, Western Terrestrials. So obviously you're the vocalist. And then we have for bass, we have Jason, we have Jared on drums, we have Alex on keys, and most recently you said with pedal steel is Chris, right? Just want to make sure I had everyone correct there.
So Chris has been playing lead guitar with us, and I play guitar too. Our pedal steel player is a guy named Asa, who's an incredible player. He's based out of Nashville, so I haven't seen him since we were down there recording when COVID hit, and that's the last time I've seen him in person. But Chris has been working with us up here and helped us finish the record and has done a couple shows with us, and he's fantastic. So it's a really exciting feeling coming out of quarantine and everything else. We've somehow been able to keep pushing our projects and our music forward, and just very recently over the last 3 weeks, getting back together and practicing and getting out and playing a couple of shows. It's just very, very, very exciting and good feelings. And and it feels, you don't know when you're away from each other for a while, because playing in a band's a weird thing. There's these little bits of ESP that happen between, like, you just sort of pick up on what other people are going to do. And when you don't see people all the time, you don't know if that goes away or if it's going to come back. And that's been, for me, it's like, okay, we still got it. It's going to be okay. We got exciting things we're still going to do.
Right. That's a big thing I think people sometimes take for granted when they're watching something creative, whether it be like comedy, music, whatever, is that if you're out of it for such a long time, you can practice all you want on your own or like recite things. But if you're not in that group setting, the practice or kind of like be out in live, like with the audience, like you sometimes that's rust you got to shake off. So it's great that you have that chemistry, just pick right back up where you left off.
And it's, for me, it's really, what playing music is for me has always been a group experience. And that's what I get really, energized by, is that interaction with other people. And so I've just missed it on like a cellular fundamental level. And I think this group of folks I'm playing with, we all sort of feel that way. And we're musicians who played together with other people, been doing it for a long time. We've all like taken conscious breaks, like, maybe it's time to hang it up. And if you have that gene or that proclivity or whatever it is, it's just, you can't not do this. And so every time I've never made it more than a month or two without playing a gig since I was 16. And this has been that first stretch. And so I'm very, very excited that the things are getting back to, normal's probably not the right way to think about it. It's a new, different thing, but it involves being able to play music and see people again.
Right. It's like the path back to, like I think it is. It's like a normalcy. Like there'll be things we've learned from it. I think there'll be some like evolution of different practices and stuff. But I think the core things of like, doing something creative, like performing, like those things aren't going to go away. Like as far as maybe how it's packaged, but.
And on my more optimistic days, which are most of them as of late, I think there's some really positive things that can come out of it for our industry and creatives in general. I mean, this program you're doing has come together over the course of quarantine and COVID.
Right.
And I know a bunch of other stories like that. And I think music and live music in general had gotten to this point where I think some people started to take it for granted. It's, harder than ever to make money being a musician. That's just a fact pre-COVID. But I have seen, when I've been out, I've seen a little bit of music so far. People are hungry for it and appreciate it in a way that I think, they've been numb to a little bit. And while, we've lost some venues that I care deeply about, and it's been very hard in so many ways, I see coming out of these ashes the opportunity to really appreciate art, appreciate creatives, and appreciate that this is people who are not just passionate about what they're doing as artists, but they're trying to trying to make a living, and that's something we as a society should find a way to support, because we sure as hell missed it when we couldn't have it.
Oh, completely. One thing I want to ask, so how did everyone in the band or the collective of Western Terrestrial, how did that form? How did you guys all meet?
Yeah, so I've worked with the rhythm section, the bass player and the drummer off and on for quite a while now. So I grew up in Thetford. I had a punk band called the Yarbles in high school. And I was telling you before we got on air, but we used to go out, you had like a circuit, you'd play 242 in Burlington, you'd play Dana Rec or the church out in Rutland. And we had, we do shows in White River Junction. And we sort of like go around and play. And there's like a scene up in St. Johnsbury at the time. This was like early 2000s.
Okay.
And it's funny, we all the same people at each show. We just, travel around the state, but it was being a part of something. It was a scene. And it's like, you never live that feeling down. Like there's nothing as cool feeling as being in a band or being part of a scene with other bands. And I have that, I have that gene. I've tried a lot of different other things. Like playing music is what I sort of have to do. I started a band called Pariah Beat after that in my 20s, which was sort of an eclectic Americana collective thing. And we played, we were based out of Boston for a while, but we used to play around Vermont and did that for a good handful of years. And that was sort of an evolving cast of characters and songwriters and performers. But sort of the end of that run was the drummer and bass player that I'm working with now, Jason and Jared. And just we've gotten very close and gotten to travel together and play music. And we sort of all had that conversation about 2 years ago. We'd stopped doing Pariah Beat, but we missed playing music. And we were like, this is what we're supposed to be doing together. Let's do it. Let's do it right and really figure out, what it is we care about, why we're doing this, and then do it, put our money where our mouth is, put our chips down. And I'd worked with Asa a little bit, the steel player, in the Pariah Beat days as well. So we got a hold of him in Nashville and he hooked us up with some folks down there. And the notion was, let's go record a record down there, see what happens. And that was before we sort of fully formed. We didn't have the Western Terrestrials name yet, but we had this collection of songs sort of rooted in appreciation of classic country and old school sort of American music, but doing it with a contemporary sensibility. And we recorded this first record in Nashville about a year and a half ago now.
Oh, wow.
And released it in September of 2019, I guess. And got a really good response. I mean, it surprised me. And the record itself is called The Clear Lake Conspiracy. And it's like an antagonistic, almost folk rock record about mainstream country. And sort of Nashville is the corporate place. Mm-hmm. And but it resonated with the players we were working with, folks we met down there. And when that record came out, we met some other folks online, reached out to us, in particular this guy Dean Miller, who's a producer, and his dad is Roger Miller, who's like one of the classic country icons. He did King of the Road and Dang Me and a bunch of other songs, mm-hmm. My parents love, my grandparents love. And he invited us down to do another record with him. And that was what we were doing March of 2020 when the world sort of shut down. Mm. And then the story has gotten sort of weird and circuitous since then, but it's somehow, even in quarantine and everything, I've had the best creative year of my life playing music and sort of had more success connecting with people in these unique, unconventional ways like this, which just didn't exist even 4 or 5 years ago. And I try to reflect on that when in moments of frustration with not being able to play music and be out, that it's unfolded in a way that I couldn't have predicted, but it seems to be resonating. So I think we're going to keep doing what we're doing.
That's so cool. So the two things I pull away from that is, one, I didn't realize that this has only been something like probably under 2 years. This the group you're in now, correct?
That's right. And okay. More than half of it has been during the COVID era. So
yeah,
we've played out, a handful of times, and we're getting ready to play out a whole bunch more coming up. But it really has been a very small amount of time in the scheme of things.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. And then the second thing I pull away too is the one theme I've noticed. We've interviewed probably, gosh, like, but probably 15 to 20 different acts, I would say, give or take. And the one thing that's kind of a theme I notice for most people is I think during COVID, people had stronger creative, like, I don't know, breakthroughs or like just eureka moments than not, because you would hear different stories from people made on the bigger scale, and they're like, oh, like this was, I kind of like retreated back, not as many ideas, but for at least the people I've talked to, it's like they're hungry. There's just a lot of different ideas coming out, which is great.
That's certainly been the case for me. And there's been moments of just complete frustration because it has been, tricky to see where the light at the end of the tunnel is. Although I think we're in Vermont, at least we're kind of there. But at the same time, I've done more creatively. I've written more songs, and I've had more traction in the world. That's not the only reason you play music as a musician or an artist, but it helps. It's certainly a good feeling. And I think something about this Western Terrestrials sort of campy, but also serious thing we're doing, it's a surreal sort of approach to the genre, at least, and to being a band. And I think that surreal quality, the sort of off-kilter nature is resonating with people because we're in this sort of surreal off-kilter time period. And it's really cool. And I've sort of made a pact with myself to roll with it because it seems to be, something seems to be clicking with folks and with us.
Right. If you have that gut feeling, I say just go with it.
You got to. And I mean, that's the truth is you have to. And it's sort of like swimming upstream. You can do that for a while, but it'll catch up to you. And so that on the most poignant level with this group of guys in this band, it's like we've all played in other bands. We've all taken breaks. We've all, got married, had kids. And it's like, this is what we do though. So you find a way back to it. And sharing this experience with, people who have that same attitude it's great.
That's awesome. So we were discussing this a little bit earlier, but let's kind of dive into it more. So the sound of what Western Terrestrials can be described as like kind of Americana, maybe traditional country, rockabilly. That was a term that Mike, a friend of ours, Mike Vetrano, threw at me when I got approached on this interview lead. What is like, how would you describe the sound of Western Terrestrials and what inspired you? It sounds like a lot of it's your upbringing, maybe for everybody else, but yeah, kind of what's the breakdown of this sort of genre and like sound of music?
So a couple of bits. I've been calling it cosmic American music is the phrase I've been using, which we borrowed from Graham Parsons, who I'm not going to compare myself to Graham Parsons, but he did something. He was playing traditional of sorts country music in the 60s, but it was, offensive to traditional country folks. He gets credit for sort of bringing the Rolling Stones into the country world. He was a Southerner, but he went to Harvard for a while, dropped out. He played with the Byrds, the 60s sort of quintessential hippie band. But he really loved old country music, and he did it with his own attitude and sort of unique voice. But he would pull in elements of Motown and soul and rock and roll and whatever he wanted in this sort of stew. And so if he wanted, Stax horns on a country song, he would do it. And that resonated strongly for me for a number of reasons, but also Jared and Jason, I've been playing with the longest. And we actually got to stay, the sort of the legend around Graham Parsons. He passed away when he was 26 in a hotel room in Joshua Tree, overdosed. But we actually got to stay in that hotel room when we were on tour, maybe 5 years ago at the tail end of Pride Beat. And that hanging outside a campfire talking about all of this was sort of the genesis of the Western Terrestrials idea. But we get like a lot this, like, what is this you're doing? You're playing old country, you're from Vermont. And we were thinking about, we're sort of the outsiders in whatever context we're playing this music. And that was where the Western Terrestrial sort of concept came up. It was like, we're the outsiders, who are the ultimate outsiders, like, aliens, that's this as outsider as it gets.
Right.
And then that sort of was liberating. It's like, we can play, we can do whatever we want. And, if we want a guitar solo on a rockabilly song, we'll do it because it's funny or it makes us happy or it's, unique. So that's sort of the sound at its core is based on traditional country and like the Hank Williams, and then through like sort of Waylon Jennings and sort of the Outlaws, like we really love. And there's these overt tributes to folks like Roger Miller or Hank Williams or Waylon Jennings or Merle Haggard, and we cover their songs, but we're not the type of players, and better lucky than good. We're not good enough to really emulate or reenact that kind of music, even if we wanted to. And there's bands of young people who do that really, really well right now. And there's some amazing players sort of in the sort of whatever alternative country scene right now who can sound just like the 70s country guys or just like the 50s or the 40s. And we've just never been able to do it. We do our version of it, and we developed this unique sound. But that's what it boils down to, is like we're outsiders, but we also really love this kind of music, and we grew up in the country. You can go down to the general store by my house and it is absolutely country, and I'll stack our rednecks up against Georgia or anywhere else. But then it's also Vermont, which is its own unique blend of things. And then we've all had our various musical experiences, upbringings, and we've sort of thrown it all in and try to pull out this cosmic American stew of what does it for us, and then throw aliens in there too, because why not?
I mean, with the rise of this of these reports, if they'll ever get dropped, about alien existence, I mean, I think it's really tongue-in-cheek here. I love it.
So I mean, the timing of that is pretty bizarre from my perspective too, because
right.
I've always been into X-Files and whatever weird stuff, Twin Peaks, all of that.
Okay. Yeah.
And like but like, as the aliens thing, it was a really exciting metaphor and it was fun. But then just as we started doing that, like it got kind of real. Like it's like, UFOs were on 60 Minutes 2 weeks ago, and my wife was watching the morning show like last week, and they're like talking about this government report on UFOs. What crazy timing! I'll take it though. It's
just good, casual conversation. It's not like hidden in like on the random like public access channel. Like it's like mainstream conversation is about unidentified objects. It's
very weird. And when you play in the Alien Country band, like everyone tells you their UFO stories. So if I wasn't open-minded to whatever before this, I certainly am now, because and in Vermont, interestingly, which I also didn't know, but is like consistently like the #1 per capita state for UFO sightings. And I've discovered that.
Wow.
They're like smoking pot in Vermonters. Like almost everybody does it. And you don't know, but your teachers do it, and they saw UFOs too.
I mean, it sounds very accurate. You got good craft beer. We're seeing some aliens, some pot. It's a great time.
It's a good synergistic branding. That's for sure.
It really is. Do you think there's aliens? What do you think we're getting out of this report? Here's my on the fly question for you.
So I won't answer that question because I will answer that question. I don't like, everyone asks, do you believe in aliens? I was like, I'm not gonna answer that. That's that gives up the game. Or we may in fact actually be aliens, Western Terrestrials ourselves.
Right.
I don't think the report will have anything. But what's crazy to me about the report is just that it's happening. Like they're putting out a legitimate, credible report, and I think it will say we don't know what's going on, which that's enough for me right now. That's nuts. That's nuts enough. But
that's a good
life
point.
Is very weird and mysterious.
Like a world superpower is willing to admit, like, we don't have an answer. We got nothing. Like that's a wild statement in its own right.
And when you geek out like on Reddit on UFO stuff, or was it, and like read the books and everything, which I've done that deep dive over quarantine. It's amazing. We just don't know. We don't know, and we don't know what we don't know. And it's a good little reminder, I think, to be a little bit humble and have some humility about our place in the universe. But
I think that's a good point. Yeah.
like, it's not people just making up stuff. Like the most mundane, uninteresting, seemingly people I know have told me some of the craziest stories, and they're not pulling my chain. So we'll see.
I'm intrigued. I really am.
It's not boring, that's for sure.
No, not at all. And actually, this is a wonderful segue. So, with your music, with the branding of the Cosmic Americana sound, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I really like the very diverse sound of the group, and we'll tackle some of the songs. But the one that caught my eye right away was Ethan Alien. See, that's what the segue here is.
Yeah.
Love the Vermont references. Obviously, being that you are like in a Vermont band, and that's heavy into what you're about. What was the whole like concept between that whole track?
Yeah, that one was a gift. So this is it's a pretty wild story. It's one of the better ones I have, like, from my whole course of my life. But this same sort of like 3-week period when we were getting ready to go down to Nashville in March of 2020, beginning of March, we were scheduled to go down and record, and we had to push it back a week. That week, just this sort of massive tornado hit downtown Nashville in a way that just nothing like that's happened anytime. It was real devastation, and the practice space we were going to use was wiped out. And real human tragedy and loss, and a lot of it hasn't been rebuilt. So we got down to Nashville right after that tornado and had to scramble, but we were still gonna be able to record. And then that's just as this sort of report started coming in of this virus. And I remember, like, we were in the studio Tuesday through Saturday was the plan, and on the Wednesday, one of the session guys wasn't shaking people's hands, and we were like, the other guys at the studio were giving him grief. And then by the end of that week, we were like tearing on the highway. And I remember we drove straight back from Nashville on that Friday the 13th. And I remember driving through Rutland at like 5 a.m, and people were like going like 50 down that main drag and forth. There was no rules. And it was like a scary time to be out in the world. Right in that same period though. So the week before we headed down, out of the blue on Instagram, we got a message from this guy, Ketch Secor, who's the frontman, singer, fiddle player, multi-instrumentalist for Old Crow Medicine Show, which are like a household name, at least certainly by like the Americana standards. And I don't know, like, he stumbled upon us somehow on Instagram, and the story he's told is that he'd just gotten a smartphone and was playing around, and that doesn't really explain it, but he left a comment: "You guys are weird, let's write a song together called Ethan Allen Was an Alien." So that's exactly how it happened. And it's a fantastic idea. And I wrote the song, the first draft of it in an hour or two, and sent it back to him. And I didn't know why he was in touch or if he was messing with us. And he got right back, and he was, he suggested another verse, and we went back and forth. But I was like, this is a moment. This is big. This could be, it's like, this is a really good idea, and it's going to work. And I just sort of pushed it along like it was destined to happen. So I was like, Ketch, we're going to be in Nashville next week. Let's record this together. And then we'd been, we were texting back and forth while we were down there and seeing if we could find a way to make it work. And then COVID happened, and I was like, well, this is over. It's not, shit. And then somehow we stayed in touch. We had recorded the basic tracks. He ended up recording a harmonica track and a vocal and sent it back, and we went back and forth, and then he loved it, and he recorded a music video with us. And then we've stayed in touch, and they're going to be in Vermont, like, in a couple of weeks. They're playing up at Shelburne, and I'm hoping I get to meet the guy, because it's been this purely pandemic. I think we've talked on the phone once, but it's been just sort of this back and forth musical collaboration, sending tracks back and forth. But he gets full credit for that gem of an idea. Like, it's a hell of a there's a lot packed into that title. And then for me, as sort of a lifelong Vermonter, it's like a labor of love, teasing out these little bits of Vermont weirdness, and our IPAs and our cheese and all these other. So sort of writing like it was like, it's a tongue-in-cheek love song to the state, but it's also sincere, and it's also a little bit funny. It's like what I imagine the stereotypes of Vermonters are. And then turns out people really have liked the song, and that's been, we've gotten a lot of good press off of it. And then from that sort of energy, we put together a really, really wild project last fall. We actually worked with a bunch of friends and creative and other Vermonters who were sort of out of work and not doing anything. We shot a feature film called Ballad of Ethan Alien, and it's a sci-fi
Oh my gosh.
rock opera, musical. It's just all over the place. We have a bunch of wild cameos, like Luis Guzman and the Logger and Ben and Jerry are in it briefly.
Holy crap.
And it's just getting finished right now. So it's going to be out August 1st, and we're going to tour that around the state and show it. So we'll make it out to Rutland. But that's sort of the missing piece to tying it all up is I think the Old Crow guys, I'm hoping to get them to do a cameo while they're up here. And then I think the project will be full circle.
That's amazing. I didn't realize,
Isn't that a doozy of a story?
That is. It's so cool though. Like it just sometimes you don't realize that for a song, right? Sometimes you see a song like, oh yeah, it's catchy, but you dive into so many layers, and now it just became, like you said, it was kind of a started right on the brink of when COVID happened, and now you have it into a feature film that you're working on. And that's just amazing.
Yeah, it sort of defies conventional logic, and it's like it's beautiful. It makes me really happy to think about. But like anything in life, you think of how any one of those little forks in the road could have gone slightly different. And I think not out of hubris or vanity, but I think any other band, if he'd said, "Hey, let's do Ethan Allen was an alien," I don't think anything would have come of it. And I also don't know if he would have pitched that idea to any other band, but it was like something clicked. But when we saw that, we're like, there's a lot in there. And then what was very flattering is I think that was sort of the vibe we were trying to put out there, and having someone of his stature and his experience get it and be excited to do this goofy yet more serious thing out of it. It's just really cool. And that would not have happened if not for this sort of unique last year we've been in.
Yeah, that completely. Like that wouldn't line up the way it did without that power of the internet and social media and everything.
And it's my sort of ethos going back to like DIY punk rock basement shows when I was 6, like you never know what's going to happen. You have to just show up. And I felt like this experience around that Ethan Alien song was the ultimate. Like we put this flag out of what we were trying to do, and didn't know if we get any bites off of it. And then we got this guy from Old Crow Medicine shows. You guys are cool. Let's do this.
Yeah. Wow. That I don't have, like sometimes you just don't have words, and it's not as an insult. That's wild. That's just so crazy. The thing that keeps ringing in my head to ask you, how was like doing the cameos with like Luis Guzman and Ben and Jerry? Like that's just wild. That's cool. You got those type of people in this project.
Well, it turned into this. So the genesis of it was about a year ago now. It was around July 4th, and we just put the record out, and we were thinking, what can we do? Like what? It's like an existential thing. What are you if you're a band and you can't play shows? Mm-hmm. And then what do we do with this momentum we have? And I realized every other creative I knew and had ever enjoyed collaborating with was going through the same thing. And so I started calling people and saying, what do we do with this? And I was able to get Biggie Heavy World, which is the music organization in Burlington, sponsored it, helped me with the logistics, and I was able to hire some really cool film and art school kids with Vermont background. And then the pieces just started coming together, and I realized everybody I asked was excited to be a part of a project. And so it turned into this really validating, affirming thing, because that feeling of having a creative project is unique. And I think we all had this sense that the winter was coming. And so we're come together to put this thing together. And then once I had this really great story and all these kids to brag about who were getting their first film credit and all these things, then it was very easy for me to, I got a hold of Luis Guzman's agent and then got his number. And then I cold called him, and the part that was awesome is I was, pitching about the kids and everything. And he's like, wait, is this that Ethan Alien thing? He's like, I'll do it, but I'm leaving for Hollywood. He was leaving like 2 days later. So we came back. He lives in Danville, and we shot something at his house over an hour or two, but he was really, really cool and treated the crew and the other young folks we were working with like it was a real movie, and it sort of became, it was.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we had Luis Guzman in our movie, and it was a real movie. So
that lines up with what I've heard through like articles and stuff, just how he is as a person, and just like he just really has embraced that Vermonter lifestyle, I feel. I
was a total cool guy. And then it was the same thing with reaching out to Ben and Jerry and other folks. And we'll see if we can. I'm hoping we can round up a couple other Vermont notables. But like Rusty the Logger, I got a hold of him, and he loved it. I mean, I told him the whole Nashville story and everything, and we bonded. His ringtone was a Merle Haggard song, and it went off when I sit down talking to him. I was like, oh, we're gonna get along just fine. But then for me, he treated me like a peer, and that was like really all you can ask as an artist, and very validating. He's a great guy too, and he's a really fun part in the film. Oh yeah, no, yeah, he's a Vermont comedy legend right there. Well, yeah, I mean, he's an icon. I mean, he is. He's figured it out. But if you're a Vermonter, you probably have seen the Logger at least once in your life, or you at least know who he is. Yes. Yeah, I feel like that's how you kind of know you're a Vermonter, if you at least know that name and know what he is. I played some of his clips for a couple of friends who were working on the film out of state before they were doing post stuff remotely. There's like no way Vermonters actually talk like that. They do, yeah, and Rusty isn't actually from Vermont, but he has the accent nailed. And one of my friends was visiting much more recently since vaccinations, and they were at the gas station down the road from my house, and they called me up, and they're like, "Oh my God, the Rusty accent, it's a real thing." Very true. But for me, it was like pulling all these threads of like, I mean, that's what the Ethan Alien song is supposed to be too. It's like celebrating all that's weird and unique about Vermont, but it's a cool place to live. And as I've traveled around the country, like people have heard of Vermont, and they have some, whether it's Ben and Jerry's or Bernie Sanders or what, there's something, it evokes something for them. And that's pretty cool. And I don't know if you can say that for like every state of the union or every region, but I think we punch a little above our weight. Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I feel like we do punch above our weight class. Yeah, and I like it, and like it's a little sappy, but I like being from Vermont. I'm proud of it. Mm-hmm. No, it is. I mean, I've grown up and I moved around. What's that? I was just gonna say, when I was a teenager, I hated it. I was like, I want to be in Boston or New York. Right? Yeah, of course. That angst, and then you come back like, yeah, I really actually like it. Sorry for interrupting though. No, you're fine. The joys of Zoom, right? Yeah. Actually, it's a great time to say this is Nick Charyk, and we're talking from Western Terrestrials, and this is Streaming Cassettes, Wingman of the Year. You know who we are. What I was gonna say though is that growing up, I kind of moved around, but mainly was in like the upstate New York area. They moved into Vermont full time in 2007. My parents split. My dad lived in Lake St. Catherine, but I am considered a flatlander. I have a great pride in living in Vermont as long as I have, so I definitely appreciate it. Well, that's the Ethan Alien thing too. It's like we have a pretty good flatlander joke in the film actually about flat planets and flatlanders, but the serious sentiment of it is like we're all aliens to somebody else when you think about it, and the absurdity of those sort of petty regional differences. If you think about it from outer space, it's a pretty silly, arbitrary set of distinctions. Oh, but right. I will say, whenever I'm talking to someone about why Rutland's a little special and unique from the rest of the state, I was like, you got to understand it's where the Stewart's belt starts. And it really feels more my family's from up, Utica area. Okay. And it's more, there's a Rutland's its own unique thing, but the differences culturally between Burlington and Rutland are pretty significant. Yeah, no, I've the Stewart's belt, that speaks many volumes. It is very much like the
it's the section of Vermont that's like, okay, if it ever bled into New Yorkism, it's that whole Rutland to Bennington. That's kind of the strip.
Yeah.
That's the Western Wall of like keeping New England and New York kind of at bay. But I love that. The
I
Stewart
like
line.
it. But when I, like if someone I know from like Boston or something is like, you must love, I love Vermont. It's, Church Street and Fish. And I was like, well, it is that. Have you been to Rutland and have you been to White River Junction? It's
yes, no, there's different tiers of Vermont. That's funny. I love that Stewart's Belt. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in kind of the Glens Falls area, and then I went to high school down in Hoosick Falls near Bennington. So yeah, Stewart's was quite a quite a staple. So I understand that vividly. Yeah. So.
And then some people don't even get the joke.
No, I totally get that joke. It is. It's like the Western. It's like this like the last area of Stewart's. It's like right where we are, and then it cuts off. So, let's tackle your latest single though. This was kind of a cool vibe. I really liked the way it went, and ironically, it's called 1984. It definitely had some 80s kind of nostalgia to it, but also the same sound that carries through all the other projects. What was kind of the sound behind that track?
I appreciate. I thank you. So I wrote it like that same period where I wrote that Ethan Alien song as we were finishing, or co-wrote it. As we were like on our way down to Nashville to try to figure out if we're going to still be able to record, this whole sort of uncertainty thing. And we didn't end up so we just ran out of time. We had to cancel our last studio days. So we didn't get a chance to record the song. So it was sort of sitting out there. But there were a couple of lyrics that were sort of like overtly about what was happening. There was a line about there's a line, the Twister tore down Main Street, which I wrote before the tornado in Nashville. And then the whole thing had just this surreal, this doesn't feel like home anymore. And as COVID and quarantine started, I was playing around trying to finish the song, and it just felt very relevant. But it was, I was playing on an acoustic guitar at that point, and it had sort of a folkier feel. And John Prine, who was, in the country Americana world, like a very important figure for a lot of people, he passed away early in the quarantine. He died from COVID, and he'd survived cancer and ex-wives and the whole, country story. And it hit me really hard. It's not like I knew the guy personally, but I knew his music, and I knew how much he meant to a lot of other people I cared about. And so the third verse ended up being about, it's about John Prine dying and this whole moment we're going through. And then we ended up, so it's a scene in the feature film. We ended up recording it for the soundtrack, and we put like the 80s gated reverb on it because it's like embrace the 1984 vibe. And then it's also the George Orwell 1984 is one of my favorite books. And sort of, without getting preachy, like has a lot to say about this moment we're in. Mm-hmm. So we're getting ready to release it as a single in like mid-January. And, as we were putting together the music video and stuff, it's when the January 6th riots happened. And the last verse in the song is like, just don't feel like home anymore, or it's we're not in bleeding Kansas anymore. It feels more like the Civil War. And so I was like noodling on the song, watching on TV, like the Capitol being overrun, and there's a Confederate flag like in the rotunda at the Capitol, which never happened during the Civil War. And it had for me just this very surreal quality of like, this is happening right now, and it feels like a dream, but it's also real. And it's this song that we put together over the course of this experience. So in that sense, it's completely unique from anything else sort of we've ever done. It's a powerful one. And then as we've gotten to start playing live, it works. Like we play it well together, and it feels just very contemporary for this moment. So it sort of has all those elements of what we do. There's jokes in it. There's gated reverb drums. There's synthesizers. There's like the riff from Twin Peaks, little guitar riff as an Easter egg in there. And then it's like some heavy shit about people dying and, you know, Black Lives Matter and what's happening and a political bent to it. And it's just sort of authentically us. And so we probably won't do another song anytime soon with the 80s gated reverb drums or the synthesizers. But like for this song, it's like, you got it. That's what the song wants.
It was, that's what I wanted to kind of confirm my feeling is I thought if there was any play to the novel 1984 and some of this modern time stuff and to the T, because that was kind of the thing like, okay, I like, well, from a creative process, obviously what's going on in the world, that is, I remember just surreal, like what happened with the Capitol, but the creative process was so deep to be like, okay, let's make it have this sound, but we're talking about things that relate to this novel that people talk about as being so, you know, important as far as like what it contextualizes, but what's kind of happening almost parallel right now. And it's just really interesting, that artistic process you did with the track, plus with the lyrics. And I thought,
so you got it then.
I just wanted to confirm that, you know.
Confirmed. The other funny thing about it, you know, some of it's, I guess, like, you know, confirmation bias, but I started noticing that like 1984 was sort of everywhere this year. There was the Wonder Woman 1984, and it came up a couple other times, and then right after January 6th, the book hit #1 on Amazon's bestseller for a couple of days.
Oh wow!
Because everyone was sort of, you know, this is something people were talking about in the media and talk shows and stuff, like these parallels to the book. So that was when the week we put the music video out, the book was actually #1 on Amazon's bestseller.
Wow.
Couldn't have scripted that one out. Pretty wild.
No. 2 for 2 on scripting out timings with the song releases, at least in this discussion.
Yeah, no, it's a unique little weird thing. But you can't ignore it, you know, especially twice.
Right, just to be aware of it, and then you can't, you know, you try to be like, oh yeah, every song has its own, like, we appreciate it as it is, but it's interesting when you have like pins in different moments, and you're like, shit, like, okay.
And I think that that's the story out of this album. We've been able to tell some of those stories and connect with an audience that wouldn't necessarily be there in a different way. You know, it's people who are quite literally a captive audience in their quarantine wherever they're at. But I think it gave people who discovered us or who, you know, we connected with whatever way. And the record had a really good run, astronomical by my standards. It charted on the alt country chart. It charted on the jam band chart, and it hit the Americana chart in, like, you know, it didn't crack the top 100, but I've never had anything like that happen before. And we got some really favorable, exciting press from around the world. And it's just cool. I feel some pressure now that we actually have to go out and perform and do it, but I feel so excited that it's just a different playing field than it was when we shuttered everything up last March.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you.
I have to look at, you might be the first artist I've had that's charted in some capacity. So that's wonderful.
It's the first time I've ever been able to say it. Right. But there's a couple other Vermont artists that had a very similar trajectory over this whole thing, minus the alien stuff. There's a amazing woman, Sarah King, out of Ripton, who has a record out right now that's doing quite well in that world. And there's another band out of Stowe called Maple Run that hit the alt country charts as well.
I think I've heard that name.
Yeah. But they'd both recorded stuff right before this happened, and then every artist has sort of figured out different ways to navigate being a band when you can't play shows.
Wow. Pardon me. That's so cool. Actually, this kind of fits pretty well with this next question. So you were talking about the songwriting process with these deep stories, but let's say you're just kind of, obviously in the moment, there's going to be different influences when you write, but is there a particular process you do technically when you're doing a song? Like, okay, I'd rather start with like a chorus first, or do I kind of like hum a melody? Like, what's kind of your general like theme, or is there not ever a general theme? You just kind of wing it?
So as of, you know, these first two records, I've written probably 90% of the lyrics. We have a new sprawling, massive record written, and we're trying to figure out how to bring it to life. But everyone's been writing because we've had time over quarantine. So I'm really excited for that next approach where everyone's bringing songs and choruses and hooks to the table and vibes. But how it's worked is I've never been able to sit down and write a song, which some people can do. For me, it's just noodling over like a specific syllable or pairing or alliterative phrase or something in my head for just months on end, and having different sort of ideas going on simultaneously. And then one day I'm able to sit down with the guitar, and then it sort of is fully formed. And I can't quite remember the pieces when it wasn't there. When I've tried to force it, I've written really crappy songs that don't go anywhere, or when I've tried to shoehorn two different sort of concepts together. But so when I am able to get a song to that point, it's still pretty loose, and I'll have some musical ideas, and then the fun of it is sort of working it out with the band. And that is really, I mean, our stuff is all credited that we all co-write together, and that's really the truth, because when the song comes to life, it'll be around a bass groove or a drum part or a specific fill or a keys fill, and there'll be a song like 1984, which I'll write, an acoustic guitar, and I think, maybe there'll be some accordion on it, and then when we start working on it together, it turns into this gated reverb drums throwback 80s sounding thing. And right. I just in the moment. That's really, and that's I feel lucky to have people I work with that we're able to collaborate like that. I think if you're a truly brilliant artist like Bob Dylan or someone, you can just do your own thing. But I don't think of myself like that at all. It's like I need as much help as I can get. And when we're able to sort of put aside our egos and bring our own stamp to each material we do, we're getting something collectively. It's a lot better than any one of us could do.
I feel like nowadays, it's a great point to bring this up. I think many artists now, before just collaboration, that's kind of the word I was trying to come up with, but just like, it feels like that environment's more conducive now between digital connection. I think just like the blending of genres. So, trying to do something, if it's country, and then maybe do something that's like with like maybe like more of a heavy rock or hip hop, like that's not so bombastic to do. And I think that kind of invigorates different ideas for songwriting, for instrumentation. It's really cool.
Oh, it's totally cool. And the other funny thing is it's all out there, anything you can dream up. And I was pretty confident when we came up with the alien outlaw country rockabilly band concept that no one else is doing that. And there's a total subculture of sci-fi Western cowboys and aliens. There's like a surf band doing something. There's just like a whole world out there that I've discovered through Instagram and the internet and everything. And like we're talking to each other now, and it's cool. And then there's these other genre mashup. It's a bunch of really cool stuff happening, and it's like, some people, you hear people being cynical and be like, rock and roll's dead, or there's no, and it's like, it's not, it's just, it's something different now. But that we can do this and have a conversation. We're only in or that the guy from Local Medicine Show can record a harmonica part and send it to me, and I can mix it in a studio in Randolph while I'm in my garage on a video conference here in Sharon. That's really, really cool. And it doesn't substitute for actual human, in the room interaction, but it supplements it in a way that is really cool.
It's super cool. And I think, I don't know. I just think it's really neat that you embrace that, because sometimes artists don't. And it's good that I think the more people at least embrace that things can happen that way. You don't have to be in your own like echo chamber.
And it's new. I mean, it's certainly not the attitude I had when I was 16. It was like garage, bang it out on a little PA, play a loud guitar, make something happen with your friends, and that's all that matters. But this is an epiphany moment. I mean, we had a record that was halfway done in Nashville, and the tracks got shipped up, the stems online, and it's like running thumb drives up around the Upper Valley, getting people to record their different parts, and we did it without ever within 6 feet of each other.
Yeah.
And it worked. And it's not the way I want to do it every time, but it opened a lot. It opened my eyes in a big way.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so kind of one thing I wanted to delve into was recently you were at a local place here in Rutland called Soundspace for their Soundspace sessions. George, all the different guys out there. Actually, our friend Mike Petrano's been on and on. I think he's done some stuff with them before. So the question I have for you is, that's kind of set up as like this live stream thing, right? So you can use it for your own content. They kind of collab with you. How is that type of process where you're doing like an intimate, like live show, but there's not like an audience? And what's your takeaways?
It's so cool as an artist, because like the 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old me, it's like when you have a fantasy about being in a rock and roll band, it's on stage with the dry ice and the cool lights and stuff. And then when you see, the VHS camera of you in the late 90s or the early 2000s is not that. It sounds shitty, and you're like, well, it's probably different in in real life, but you never really get a sense of what it feels like. And what they've done is really an incredible undertaking, what they're doing with the space. It sounds amazing. So as a player, you're able to hear like studio quality what you're doing, which is different than, like, say, playing at a bar or something like that. So they've gotten that part at a really high level. The visuals are very, very impressive, and there's like as much dry ice as you could demand. They won't say no. But they're super talented on the technical end as well. So it was shot with 5 cameras. I did the video editing for this one. So I got the raw camera files and spliced together what you're going to see next week. And I got just this amazing audio mix of the whole set, and it was very easy to drop together. And then I was just stunned. I'm watching. It's that experience that I sort of always wanted. And so I got nothing but good things to say about them. And then George is a total hustler, but what he's done for the scene and everyone, I mean, I think he gets out and plays himself almost every night a week. But helped me out in a whole bunch of ways. Mike connected us up, but it's just like that energy, which I think is just, I want more of in the world. And it's fundamentally a good thing when, and I want them to be successful, because places like that should exist. For us as a band, it was like we gotten a couple practices in, but it was very much going in with, we haven't done anything like this in well over a year, and it's great. We got a really good performance out of it. I'm really happy with it. But they gave us this really comfortable stepping stone to get back, and then we had our first in-person show this week. We're playing in person next week, and then pretty busy the rest of the summer. But I was like, we got to know if we got it or not. And then going into their space and working with them, we came out of it. It's like, well, shit, that's a relief, because I think we do still have it.
We're still good. We still kicking.
We still got it. Yeah, still in the game.
When's that live stream premiering for the band?
So it'll be on. It'll be up Wednesday at 7. Eastern Standard Time. It'll be on our Facebook, our website. So our website is westernterrestrials.com. It'll be on the Soundspace Facebook page as well. And it'll be like, it won't be live, obviously, because we did pre-record it, but we played the record and a couple other songs. It's about a 50-minute set. And we treated it like we were playing for an audience. And so that's the experience I hope the viewer will get. From a business standpoint, just like a band thing, it's an incredible asset for me, because when you're trying to book a show or show someone who writes about music, or the best people want to see videos these days. It's the most efficient way of getting a sense if this band is any good, or are they full of shit, or what is it? And so after years and years of sending around cell phone footage from like a smart camera, there's always been something like, well, that's pretty good, but I wish the sound was better. It sounds great, but it's pretty boring visually. To have like this dynamic performance capturing where we're at and sort of authentically what we do, it's invaluable for me. And it's like really good social media content. It's just cool. And part of our sort of gimmick is we wear these cool gaudy sci-fi Western suits with UFOs and big feet and all sorts of spooky stuff. Big feet is a legitimate pluralization of Bigfoots, but so it's fun. Like, it's a visually fun thing to watch, and they just nailed it. They lit it to make it look look incredibly expensive, and it actually was pretty damn reasonable for what they do. So I couldn't be happier. Say more nice things about those guys.
That's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that for you.
And there's a couple other, I mean, it's sort of like your story, finding a project during this and putting together these interviews. And I think for some people, the pandemic has been just devastating. And there's some artists that we've lost, I've lost a couple close friends to suicide, some to ODs. It's been a really hard time. And I think for a lot of creative types, performance was part of their therapy, part of their outlet. For other folks, though, it's given them an opportunity to dial into their passions and really, really build something. There's a really, really cool group of people that have come together in White River Junction that are starting to do these live concerts out of the Briggs Opera House, which we did this week. There's an incredibly talented group of folks out of the Underground Studio in Randolph who we've been working with. And there's another group of folks doing stuff out of Robot Studios up in Burlington. And it's really exciting to watch. And I have this optimism that there's going to be this reappreciation of what artists and creatives do, and live music in particular. And there's just this wealth of really, really talented folks in Vermont. And I'm excited to see what comes out of it in the coming year.
That's so cool. That's great to hear that as expanding to other communities in the state as well. One thing I'll touch on, because we're kind of diving into live shows, right? Things are getting lifted. Shout out to Vermont, 80% with one shot. I love it. Okay. So the one thing I was going to ask you is this: what's a memory you have, or memories of doing anything live with shows? Is there any stories that come to mind of Rules of the Road? Wow, this was a really funny show, or this was a really great moment. Just kind of that general vibe. I bet you have some in the Rolodex.
So I got in the only the time I've really gotten punched in the face was in Rutland when I was 17 at a punk show at the Dana Rec Center. And there was this band called Stepped On, maybe, I don't remember. And I don't remember why there was somehow there was a band fight, which is incredibly exciting when you're 16, 17. And I was scrapping it up, and someone grabbed me to pull me back, and I got just clocked straight in the face. And that's my one band fight experience, is I got hit hard in Dana Rec Center. And but the band we were playing with was a band called Class Clown as well. And I ended up being friends with those guys. I bet Nick Grandchamp was probably at that show too. But I was
probably
the reason I was so fired up is I was we're going to lose this venue, and it's the best thing. We need to all behave. And then that somehow escalated into a fist fight. So that's my my Rutland rock and roll, not very glorious memory.
It's a very Rutland memory, though.
It's a pretty good Rutland memory. But I love it. The experience we had, before getting back together, I mean, the first time we really were in the same room as a band in a long time, we did 2 outdoor shows last summer at festivals that were happening already. I just didn't feel right about being a convener of people. But we did those 2 shows cold without practicing. We didn't play particularly good because we hadn't played together. But the last time we'd all been together was roaring back from Nashville on that Friday the 13th overnight. And that is the most, we've gotten to play all across the country, different places. That to me is it's the only time I've ever felt really, it got very real, out on the road, and it felt just dangerous. And we were coming back, just everyone's going 80, 90 on the highway, and rules were just sort of suspended. And I knew something was really wrong in Nashville when they started canceling tours. And Nashville's all built on the music industry. And as tours are getting canceled, there's millions of dollars being left on the table. And other players started streaming back into town as tours were canceled. And I was just devastated because this is something I've wanted sort of my whole life. And we were playing a couple really cool shows in Nashville, like on Music Row.
Wow.
And we were playing in Memphis at this this bar called The Hideaway, which like Elvis used to play at back in the day. And it's been around since the 30s or 40s. And we had to cancel that too. So when we hit the road at about 10 in the morning, I was just like feeling pretty despondent and depressed about the whole thing. And then it went from that to this feeling of, oh shit, this is very real. And we went, I stopped in like a truck stop somewhere and, maybe it was Kentucky on the way back. And there was nothing on the shelves, like Twinkies, toilet paper, everything just been stripped. And that was, that was for me is when I went from feeling selfishly upset that I didn't get to play in Memphis the next night to I need to get home and I don't feel safe. And there's only been, one or two other times out traveling, playing music where that switch is flipped. I'm like, it's a very big, scary world out there. So that's the road story that's resonated with me through this whole thing is that feeling. And we rolled into Rutland. Yeah, like I said, it was just getting light. And we made it back to my house in Sharon and loaded up around 7:30 that morning, and then went our separate ways and didn't see each other at the same time until about 3 weeks ago.
Oh, it was such a surreal time. And I can't imagine you being on the road. Like, at least if you're local in your community, it's still scary to see, but it's like, okay, there's like some familiarity with faces. And it's like, okay, we're all like in this together. But when you're in another place that's like out of home, especially, I feel like Vermont makes you really appreciate community more than other areas of the world. Maybe it's a selfish bias, but I just feel that. And I can't imagine the feeling you were going through in that moment.
I think it's, realizing that everyone else is uncertain and scared at the same time. The sort of veneer of like society gets a lot thinner quickly, and it's sort of how quick, everyone had their own experience with that week. It was a really wild week, but how quickly it went from sort of your mundane day-to-day bullshit to, oh, none of that exists anymore. And I have a whole new set of anxieties and realistic things to be afraid of.
Yeah. So you have so tell us about like what you have this summer for shows. Sounds like you're pretty packed.
So it's getting more so. It's all up on our website, or we're keeping that updated. We're doing a really cool group of shows with a couple of the artists I mentioned earlier. We're doing a thing called the Vermont Roots Road Show, and we haven't got a Rutland date yet, but we will get one figured out. But it's with Sarah King, who's great, an artist named Ida Mae Specker, who's a fiddle player, songwriter, I think champion fiddle player out of the Bellows Falls area.
Wow.
Another band called Saints and Liars, who are also sort of from that area. And they also put out a record recently during COVID. And then a Maple Run band out of Stowe. And so we're playing with them right now. We're booked at Magic Mountain in Manchester, Vermont. On the 7th of August, we're playing the 14th in Jay Peak with that group of folks. And then there's a higher ground date in September. I don't know the exact one. And then we're doing Western Terrestrials, they're not all announced or formalized yet, but we're doing a series of block parties in White River Junction with some other local bands. We're doing one in the South Royalton on the Green with Bo Thayer, who's an amazing Central Vermont legend of music world. We're playing with him July 10th, I believe. And then there's like a Montpelier block party thing coming together as well. So that's what's definitely on the book so far. And then there's other stuff coming together. It's like hard to say no to anything right now because I'm just so excited about.
Right. Just like the passion for the project, the passion being cooped up in the house. What's really cool, I have to tell you, is one of the acts I did interview during my stint at Soundspace was Bo Thayer. He was. Yeah, I got to meet him. He was a really cool guy.
Isn't he a cool guy? So I'd never met him, and I'd met him like I'd seen him play. We'd I think been on a bill together a couple of times over the years, but never really hit it off. And he's so he's very involved with this Ballad of Ethan Alien film. He's the narrator of the film. He's one of
he has a
the main
great voice for
characters.
that.
He's wonderful. And as I pitched him, I was like, we're looking like it's like the Vermont version of the Waylon Jennings Dukes of Hazzard narrator, which he nailed. And he plays banjo in it, and he's just all around hysterical. He ended up writing a bunch of music for it. He's another one of these folks who's just been in this creative renaissance through the whole thing. But I called him up out of the blue about the film thing. He invited me up to his place, and we just hit it off. And we've been friends since. We text and talk. And but I think he's put out about 5 albums during the course of this quarantine or something just truly astonishing like that. And we've talked about that a couple times, and you can't really explain it. It's just, when I think it boils down to distills down to, like, for an artist, when times are weird and troubling and interesting, there's a lot of source material. And if you can open yourself up to that, it can be a well of creativity, or I think for others, it can also be a really, really hard time. And for me, it's been a little bit of both, but mostly by and large, certainly positive on the creative front.
And that's good. I mean, you can have those bad times, right? Because that's the human experience, but it's good that you can take a moment like this and grow from it. And so I feel like that's a resounding theme in this episode, but it is. I feel like what's cool about us having this episode right now is with the announcement of things being lifted in Vermont and a lot of our other Northeastern brethren of states due to, like, us getting vaccinated and stuff. It's very reflective, because it's a little bit of like, wow, okay, yeah, there is like some normal-ish things are happening, but you look back and you're like shit, like that 15 months, you learned a lot. You learned a lot about yourself, good and bad, and about others. And I've been thinking that way this week. I feel like it's really an interesting accord we're in right now.
Totally, I'm right there with you. And then there's a part of me, if I'm being totally honest too, that's like, all right, now I have to go out and do it. It's like all these things no more excuses. I just wished I could do. No more excuses, and I can't mope around and be, I can't have a lousy day because they were, out of the sandwich I wanted at the gas station or something. Like, I gotta get back out in the world and be excited about life and appreciate it for all these things that I wished I could appreciate. And so far, so good, I guess.
Right. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
One last, this is kind of the last question related to, we have a final question we always ask everybody, but the one question separate from that is, what's your thoughts on the music landscape as a whole? How I kind of break this down is depending on the genre, but for you, the one thing I'm kind of curious about, we talked about on air, before we recorded, is where do you feel, since you're kind of an element that's in the country atmosphere, where do you feel like country is as a whole? There's a lot of this battle, I think, in the country scene on a bigger picture between bro country and kind of more classic kind of country sound. Like you said, you're kind of in a more alt area, but you have definitely established roots in it. What's your kind of thoughts overall and where you think country is going to lead towards?
It's interesting. I mean, my hope, and I've alluded to it a couple of times, I hope musicians can actually make money for a little while, at least after this quarantine. It's gotten really hard to make money as a musician doing anything besides playing live, which is why it was so devastating for truly professional musicians. And we were at a point where we were doing it very seriously. We had a really good run of shows booked, but we all still had, we have families and day jobs and things like that. But you really have to be on the road, playing every night. And that's not quite the way it should be. I don't think musicians should be able to make money off of selling records. This streaming Spotify bullshit is just not, doesn't work. So we have to figure out as an industry and, as creatives, what is it next? And I don't think it's just Patreon. I don't think it's just, there needs to be a way to monetize our art for people to do it. And that's not true because, stubborn people like me will do it no matter what, because we're compelled to. But that's what I really am hoping comes out of this, is a new appreciation of music and a new, set of ways that artists can actually make a living doing it. Regarding country music, I don't. The bro country stuff is just it's just the worst. Like they really have stripped everything. I mean, like it's blatantly sexist, just to begin with, and it's insulting really to this tradition of music, and it's just not good. But it also sells. It makes a ton of money for a very small group of artists and the labels. But it's the most successful thing going right now from a dollars and cents. You go anywhere in the country, and there's going to be a corporate country radio station. 3 or 4 clicks if you're surfing through the channel. You'll get there, and it'll probably be a dude singing with a snap track, and there'll probably be something about cutoff jeans and girls and trucks and drinking beer and all this nonsense. And that is what that aspect of the country business has always been really, really good at. It's figuring out where you make the money, and then beating that dead horse until it's very well dead, and then eventually there's a new trend that emerges. And so I hope we're at the tail end of the bro country bullshit. The sort of more mainstream artists that are actually putting out really, really good stuff now are all, in my opinion, there's a bunch of women doing really, really cool stuff from Miranda Lambert on down that I can get excited about.
Right.
And there's a handful of more mainstream folks like Chris Stapleton, who's incredible.
Yeah, he's really good.
And others. But in the underground, which is like a very, very real thing, there's a movement of folks who are doing sort of Americana stuff, really authentic, really, really cool throwback country that are gaining an audience and figuring out a way to put it together. There's a guy named Charlie Crockett, who's my favorite of the sort of underground scene. And I had a moment where I was seeing a friend the other day, and he was playing his iPod mix, and Charlie Crockett came on. And I was like, how the fuck do you know about Charlie Crockett? I thought I was the only one. And I realized that, no, these people are getting out there. And if you like Charlie Crockett, you like what we do. I would hope. But that gave me hope. And ultimately, there's a reason that country has however you define it, there is a timeless quality to it. There's a reason it's a multi-generational thing. And for me, it's the takeaway of getting to record in Nashville, getting to work with some of the people we did, and some of the studio players we worked with have played on records from, Garth Brooks, but also like George Jones and Tammy Wynette and Waylon Jennings, and getting to connect into that sort of living legacy, that chain of what country music is to me. I feel like we were given that handoff. We were treated like we belonged, and we were treated like, peers in that sense. And so that's very empowering. It's like, that's what we're going to go out and do, is do exactly our weird thing, but it is a genuine appreciation for that legacy and that living legacy of country music. And that's sort of where I can't get too down or think too much about bro country, the other corporate bullshit. And if you like, there's a lot of really, really good history around country music. There's a podcast that's just great that has a second season that's come out called Cocaine and Rhinestones. And what a title. And it's the narrator is a guy named Tyler Mahan Coe, and his dad is David Allan Coe, who's one of the country legends. And he just sort of breaks down in a very analytical, very well-researched, each era of 20th century country. And there was always a pop mainstream country that everybody hated from the traditionalists. But it figured out a way to just bring out all of the soul and all of the pathos and turn it into a formula that would crank out money. And eventually people got sick of that. And then something new came along. And if Nashville, the industry knows how to do one thing, it's that really well. And we've seen that with this current, whatever it is, bullshit corporate radio, bro country thing. I mean, they've figured a way to formula that works really, really well, sells a ton of records, populates radio stations around the country, but it will change, and there'll be a new wave of something different. And eventually that'll get monetized and soaked up, and it's always supposed to change. But there's also simultaneously this very authentic living legacy. And you listen to Hank Williams and Waylon Jennings next to each other, they don't sound objectively the same, but there's something there, right? And I think Miranda Lambert, it's a through line, and there's going to be another chapter of that and another chapter, and that's what I come back to. And I can't explain it, I can't say what it sounds like, I can sort of touch it, what it feels like, but it's country, it's that.
Do you feel that it's going to be sooner, that next chapter, or do you think we still have a few more years?
Oh, I think it's got a couple more years left than us.
Yeah.
And I do listen to country radio because I'm curious. I'm just fascinated. And I watch the awards show and stuff, and some of it I just don't get. But the CMAs or CMTs or whatever, there's like 5 of them were last week.
Oh yeah.
And it was weird. It felt they had this sort of existential crisis around like Old Town Road last year. It's like, what do we do with this? Because it was like charting, and they're like, it can't be country, and they're like, well, why can't it? And they're like, no one wants to say it can't be because it's like Little Nas's, what's different about him, and no one wants to say it.
But it's pretty obvious.
Well, yeah, it is.
At least in my opinion.
And it's a banger song. It's a banger of a song. It's a fucking great song, and it's as country as any of the bro country stuff, if any of that's country. But what I noticed this year is they actually had, in between some of the more traditional sappy stuff, they had like a couple trap country artists come out and they sort of tried to embrace that. And it's not out of the goodness of their hearts or like a moral stand. It's because they see where the dollars are coming in. But that to me felt more in flux than the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's going to turn into something better, something that I personally like more, but it will. I think it is gonna shift. Yeah,
that makes sense. I think for me, we had a debate once about like, is country music like the industry version? Like, are they the biggest poachers in the music industry for taking other elements and then just monetizing the living hell out of it? And
they're the best. And if you like dig into the history, there's a strong case to be made that they always have been, in popular music for the last 100 years.
Right.
So much of it is out of that industry, and they're good at it.
Yeah. The one thing I was going to touch on was there's certain, for me, because of my background, there's certain aspects to maybe what would be considered bro country, like that it would catch my ear, right? Like, okay, this is interesting. But the thing I think that annoys me the most is the instrumentation. I don't mind as much because of my background, liking things that are maybe more percussion heavy, hip hop. But like you said, it's like the cliche lyrics that are just totally like empty. That's the thing where it's like, okay, they're in a truck and like this guy probably doesn't know how to drive the truck. Like that's the thing that rolls through my head.
Oh, totally. And it's just fundamentally safe too, right? There's nothing edgy or dangerous about it.
Right.
And for me, it's like, if I want to listen to like a hip hop record, I want it to go for it. And I don't want this watered down bullshit version of country and hip hop or whatever else. And I think it's sort of offensive to both genres. And it's certainly offensive to rock and roll. And it's just safe bullshit. And
right. You can listen to like a Bubba Sparks track if you want that sound.
Yeah. And I take him over any of them.
Yeah.
And he was doing it earlier too.
Oh, way earlier. Yeah. It's interesting. It's one of those things that I think the reason I thought that maybe the tide could be turning a little bit is I feel horrible not knowing the album title, but what Casey Musgraves won the Grammy a couple years back. That was one of those times where I'm like, okay, this is not like your normal like mainstream country. Like, it has some like originality to it, and that made me think maybe things are turning in the tide a little bit. And then like Chris Stapleton, like you said,
Casey Musgraves is just incredible, and she's put out a couple of different just incredible albums. For whatever reason, that's the artists like her are like what's exciting about what's happening right now. And every now and then one of them slips through the cracks, and they can't shut them down, so they sort of embrace Casey Musgraves, or but But that's the future. Is there'll be more Caseys, I hope.
Yeah, hopefully so. I agree with you. So we'll get to our final big question. We always ask different people on the show, kind of, if somebody's starting out as an artist, what's like ballpark, like 3 to 5, a couple things that you would recommend, that some piece of advice that, hey, you know what, you should be aware of this. You should have this prepped. What's kind of some piece of advice you'd give to like any aspiring musician?
I say trust that feeling in your gut. Like, if this is what you want to do, for me at least, and the guys I play with, like, we've known it, and it's something that you wrestle with and try to put away and try to ignore when it's inconvenient, or and it's hard. Like, playing in a band is not, some ways it's like having 4 relationships at the same time, and there's a lot of emotions, and bands break up and you lose people and circumstances change. And like, success is elusive and rare, even like small victories. And I wouldn't really have it any other way or regret my trajectory, the steps I've taken, but the energy I've spent trying to put it away or trying to ignore that sort of homing instinct of, this is what I have to do, it's been wasted time and wasted energy. And a lot of it has been, this is not what society thinks I should be doing, or this is not a respectable career, or whatever, or, I can't sing as good as whoever else. And all that shit is just wasted energy. And when you trust it. So that would be the advice I wish someone had given me when I was 16, is just don't stop. And I think the best advice is just be shameless and put it out there, and ask people for help, ask people to play your music, ask to be on the show, ask to be on the bill, and don't take no for an answer. And don't waste time worrying about people making fun of you or saying no or not liking what you do. Just fuck them and move on to the next one. That's that'll get you far, those two, I think.
Those are good.
And then the last one is, treat the people, appreciate the people that let you do your art, appreciate the people you play with, appreciate the people that support you. Mm-hmm. Appreciate that it's a privilege to get to play music.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I feel like that's a core thing in life. If you give love out, you'll get love back.
And it's there's plenty of musicians who are assholes, but there's a lot more that aren't. It's a really wonderful community, and I think appreciating that community will take you far.
Yeah, that's so cool. I think you're right. I feel like there's like just a lot of like acceptance. There's a lot of like, you just grow amongst each other's energy. And I've noticed that beyond just one particular genre, it's just like different scenes. You kind of see a pattern with that. But yeah, that's some great advice. I think that sometimes the advice like that is just straight to the point, because if you have a passion for it, you should follow through, take those leaps of faith, and let the rest happen.
If it does, or if it doesn't, or it might happen different, but there's a million people who are better guitar players than me who have never played out of their bedroom. And that's fine if you want to do it, but the courage to go out on stage and be, just mediocre at first, that takes, that's true guts. Mm-hmm. But you got to do it. You got to keep doing it and keep showing up. And sometimes cool things happen.
Right. Nick, this has been amazing. I appreciate you hopping on. I know this is the middle of the weeknight, so I really appreciate you squeezing me in.
Anytime, and it's such a pleasure to talk music, talk Vermont, all these things. But I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me and think about what I do.
Of course. Just because we'll have all the links in our description on the YouTube page, but where can people find out to learn more about yourself and the rest of the guys in the band Western Terrestrial? We'll do like the live stream, your website, but where's like the best spot to get all that info?
So the website's the Rosetta Stone there, westernterrestrials.com. That'll get you to our YouTube, which we have a bunch of music videos. We have a preview for the Ballad of Ethan Alien feature film coming August 1st. We have a link to our Instagram, which has a bunch of really fun content. And then we also have our Facebook on there, which is more slightly drier content, but has all the dates and important information there as well. But it's also a fun website. It's got some good sci-fi Easter eggs in there and cool visuals. But that'll tell you everything and a little bit more of the pieces of our bio that I forgot to talk about.
Hey, that's perfect. Well, awesome. Well, Nick, thank you so much. We'll talk real quick in post, but this has been a great time.
Thank you. It was truly a pleasure, and we'll meet in person one of these days soon enough.
Yes, I have a feeling. I know Mike's working magic in the background, so I feel like that'll happen sooner than later, one of these days.
All right.
But yeah, thank you guys as always watching. This is Streaming Cassettes. This was Western Terrestrials. If you know where to go, wingmanoftheyear.com. You get your shows, your blogs, your merch. Let us know some acts that you want to have on the show. And stay tuned. We have a big announcement, probably next week or two I'll announce, for a possible little music adventure in July that you guys could all check out. All right, Streaming Cassettes, Wingman of the Year, signing out. Nick, thanks again.
Thank you.